Hello everyone, this is Stjepan and welcome to another analysis video on hanging pawns. I'll continue the coverage of the 2018 Chess Candidates Tournament. Round 1 has brought 4 mega exciting games and only one draw with 3 decisive results, which is great for the tournament and chess in general. There have been a few surprising results, and the biggest one being Kramnik's crushing victory against Grischuk, which has definitely put him on the right track and helped him get a confidence boost and justify himself being the wild card elected for the candidates, which must be tough psychologically on anybody. And the game I'm about to show you was played between Alexander Grischuk, who suffered a blow against Vladimir Kramnik yesterday, but he's still the most unpredictable of all 8 players, and one loss should not affect him significantly, as he's known for keeping composure in stressful situations and having nerves of steel, actually, and he's the best known chess player for that. He faced the young American Wesley So, who also had a bad round 1 game. He lost to Caruana, who played an aggressive Catalan and crushed him completely. In this game, Grischuk was white and he opened with pawn to e4. Wesley So replied with e5, the classical, knight to f3, knight c6, bishop b5, the Ruy Lopez or the Spanish game, and a6. Wesley So plays the classical Morphy defense. We have bishop to a4, retreating the bishop, knight to f6. 2 other most common moves in this position are b5, chasing the bishop further away to b3, or developing the bishop to c5 to an active square. White castles in this position, bishop to e7. Much better is bishop to c5, developing on a more active square and targeting the often weak f2 square, but bishop to e7 is okay as well. d3, b5, chasing the bishop to b3, bishop b3, d6, c3 and castles by Wesley So. And this is still a very well-known position and well-known theory, and there is over 300 games in live book from this position. And h3, which is played by Grischuk, is a bit uncommon, and after this move the echo code officially of the opening is c84, which is closed Ruy Lopez and something a weird 6 move for white. And the most common move instead of h3 would be rook e1 for white, as was played in the game between Carlsen and Dingley-Ren in St. Louis 2017, which Carlsen ended up winning, but that's another story. Anyway, here Wesley So continues with bishop to b7, and in this position he has already equalized and even stands a bit better, but it's a well-known position and both sides have something to play for. White can look forward to a central pawn break, while black can consider a queenside pawn avalanche, a knight maneuver and a timely f5 break on the king side, or even d5 himself, breaking in the center. Grischuk continues with knight b to d2. Perhaps better and more active was bishop to e3, developing the bishop first. We have rook to e8. And knight to g5, a move in Grischuk style, exploiting the weakness of the last move and targeting the f7 pawn, which is now attacked twice and defended only by the king. And Wesley So immediately admits his error and simply retreats back the rook to f8, just admitting his mistake. We have rook to e1, developing the rook on a semi-open file, or not even semi-open, but a more active file, and d5 by Wesley So, aggressively breaking in the center and initiating the opening of the position. Textbook-wise, he should have connected his rooks first and developed the queen first, but the move is okay, and it's justified in this position. Grischuk reacts with d takes d5, we have knight takes d5, and knight d to f3, defending the g5 knight, which is now attacked twice, and solidifying his position. Queen to d7, developing the queen, connecting the rooks, and d4 by Grischuk. Not the most accurate move, but once again his style, not fearing the consequences, but surely he must have calculated them well nonetheless. He's trying to highlight his move, his more active pieces and his knights on f3 and g5, and the bishop pair as well, which is staring at the black king. Here Wesley So takes with the e-pawn, e takes d4, and Grischuk makes a mistake. He should have taken with the knight or played queen to d3, threatening mate on h7, and which would definitely provoke a weakness such as g6. Instead he played c takes d4, isolating his d-pawn for no good reason, except perhaps giving his knight an eventual output square, and also allowing Wesley So not to weaken himself with g6, and he gave him time to play h6, chasing the knight away. And the knight doesn't have too many options, only one, so Grischuk plays knight to e4. Now Wesley finally gets to play his rook to e8, moving the rook for the 3rd time now that the knight is no longer eyeing f7. We have bishop to d2, developing his last minor piece. knight to f6 by Wesley So, challenging the e4 knight, and Grischuk just ignores that because he can recapture with the rook. And as we will see, there are no really useful discoveries by the bishop which would open up the rook on e8. He simply develops with the rook to c1, and after knight takes e4, rook takes e4, Wesley So plays bishop f6, attacking the rook and also threatening the weak d-pawn by attacking it the third time, but giving Grischuk an opportunity to take a major lead in the initiative, which he uses instantly. He plays the best move, the aggressive rook to g4, and he's now much better. By allowing this maneuver, Wesley So made his life much harder, and his h-pawn is now hanging due to the pin, and he has a rook staring at the g7 pawn. I mean, the rook is also not that easy to evict, as was Grischuk's rook yesterday, which cost him the game against Kramnik. He should have played, Wesley So should have played the aggressive h5 in this position, chasing the rook to an inferior square and defending the h6 pawn indirectly, and instead he played the much inferior king h8. And Grischuk now has a huge advantage, and a simple mistake such as bishop to f6, which seems to be a great move, winning a pawn at first glance, brought Wesley from equality to huge inferiority in just a few moves, and Grischuk was quick to build up on his advantage, as he usually does. He plays rook to c5 here, the absolute best and most aggressive move, ignoring the d-pawn and getting more attackers into play, as Paul Morphy would recommend. And Wesley replies with a horrible passive move, which seems to be a move of a 1500 rated player, completely neglecting white's threats and initiative. He plays rook a to d8, giving Grischuk precious time to build up on the attack and just giving him a free hand on the king side and in the center of the board. Grischuk replies with the best move once again, queen to c1, eyeing the h6 weakness and threatening mate if black isn't careful, because if bishop h6, gh6, queen h6 would be mate, because the rook is covering the g file. And Wesley So replies with knight takes d4, and after knight takes d4, rook e4. Now if Grischuk captures on h6, Wesley could reply with rook takes g4, and thus eliminating the rook from covering the g file. We have rook takes c7 by Grischuk, threatening the queen. Queen captures the knight on d4, bishop to e3, chasing the queen away, and Wesley replies with rook takes g4, which is a good move, he didn't have to move the queen. And in this position, both bishop takes d4 and h takes g, the rook on g4 are winning for white, and Grischuk chose h takes g4. And now both the queen and the b7 bishop are attacked, so black can't take on g4, can't take the pawn on g4, but and the loss of a piece is becoming inevitable and the position is already desperate. We have queen to e4 by Wesley So defending the bishop on b7, but Grischuk simply plays f3, chasing the queen away, and the d5 square is covered by the bishop, the c6 square is covered by the rook. He's forced to move the queen away from the defense. He plays queen to b4, and Grischuk simply takes. He plays rook takes b7, grabbing the bishop, and Wesley So is now just a piece down for absolutely no compensation at all. He plays bishop to b2, bishop takes b2, a tactical trick, as now queen to b2 would fail to queen e1 check. So if he took the bishop now with queen takes b2, Wesley could simply play queen to e1 check, and he would have a perpetual check and draw. So king to h2, queen h4, king to g1, queen e1, and so forth. So a nice trick by Wesley, but Grischuk of course sees that, and after bishop takes b2, he simply plays queen to f1, ignoring the threat and just giving back one pawn. He's still a piece up for a pawn, so absolutely nothing. Wesley replies with f6, defending the f6 pawn. We have queen to f2, threatening the bishop, bishop to e5, f4, blocking the bishop from covering the h2 square, which is important for the king, because the back rank might become weak, even though the bishop is now covering d1, bishop to d6, and g5, not backing down for a single move, and that's why Grischuk is loved by so many chess fans. His play is always imaginative, and he's never afraid whether he's better or worse, and he's shown that in this game as well. Queen to e4 by Wesley, and here he could have ended the game a bit sooner by taking on f6. Instead, Grischuk played the inferior queen to f3, perhaps fearing that he could give black enough initiative and a possible perpetual again, but nevertheless his position is still completely winning. Wesley plays queen to b1 check, and here Grischuk makes another unprecise move. He plays queen to f1. Better was king to f2, not allowing any activity for Wesley, but Wesley decides to repeat anyway with queen to e4, and after queen f3, I'm sorry, so queen to f1, queen e4, queen to f3, queen b1, and now he does play queen f2, he corrects his mistake, and this position is now more than +4 for white, and why Wesley So didn't resign yet is a mystery to me. The game did go on for a little longer. Wesley played bishop to b4, queen to e2, covering the sensitive e1 square. And there were even some checkmates possible if white wasn't careful. Queen e4 once again by Wesley, queen to f3, queen to b1, and now king to g3, finally getting the king away from the dangers of the e1 square. F takes g5, Wesley decides to open up the king side, king to h2, getting the king to a bit more safety, queen to f5, rook to f7, attacking the queen because the rook is protected by the bishop on b3, queen to g6, f takes g, bishop to d6 check, and after king to h3, Wesley So admits that there is absolutely nothing he can do to stop Grischuk from advancing further, opening up the position some more and simply mating. I mean, it's a piece up, but it's not just a piece up, it's the bishop pair which is eyeing the king menacingly, and the rook and queen are lined up on the f-file, and there is no way he could survive another 10 moves, no matter what he does. And I must say I feel terribly sorry for him, as his last few months haven't been at peak performance, and I don't know what's wrong, but he seems to be having a hard time coping with the players he used to be equal to, or perhaps even better than most. And this is now his second consecutive loss at the candidates, and he must be completely crushed psychologically. And what's worse, he lost due to his own weak play in both games, and he didn't put up much of a fight either. Anyway, I hope he will be able to pick himself up and compose himself well enough to get a positive result tomorrow with the white pieces. At least he has to stop the bleeding and play to a draw. That way he can hope to do something in the second part of the tournament. And Grischuk is now at 1 out of 2 after his loss against Kramnik yesterday and today's win, which I'm really excited about, as he is my favorite to win the candidates, and I believe he would be a worthy opponent to Magnus. Okay, thanks for watching everybody, and stay tuned for more coverage of the 2018 Chess Candidates Tournament, as I will be covering all the games. See you soon everybody, bye!